it's always so connected. It's amazing how we all kind of operate from one mind. You know, it really is. Talking about wavelengths, and I have this chart about wavelengths, and it's really interesting. You know, I was just thinking the other day about when I first discovered Science of Mind, and it was in a thrift store, actually, in North Carolina. You know how they have like the book sections in the thrift stores? I was like scanning, and this big book stood out, Science of Mind. I was like, what is that? That looks interesting. And I opened it up, and I was like totally, and I had no idea they built churches around it. You know, I had no idea. You know, and then surprisingly enough, like 10 years later, here I am with you all. So it's just amazing the way the universe works. You know, you never know how you're being led. It's like we really can trust life with all of these processes. So, but anyways, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, thank you.
And so today's talk is going to be a little bit more unorthodox compared to what you might typically hear on a Sunday service. And you might have kind of guessed that by these interesting graphs I have here. And so today's talk is going to be kind of like an exercise in merging the hemispheres of the brain, and kind of bringing those aspects together within ourselves. And so, you know, for me, as a messenger, the way that I receive messages is I get them through these intuitive flashes, these intuitive hits, and these sort of inner visions, and also through my dream state. And my dream state is very, very active. And ever since I was maybe about 17, 18 years old, I started having these really interesting sort of visitations with what people might call angels or guides in my dream state. And as they come, they relay very specific information that often surprises me about my own life, things going on in the trajectory of my path, and they offer guidance, and they also have offered me information about the lives of other people. If there's a relationship I need to know about, or if there's something that I need to relate to someone, they'll often give me that information. And they'll also relate information that I'm being guided to share, either through my writing or through my talks. And so this information that I'm going to share with you today is kind of a symposium of what's been coming in the past maybe like 2 months or so. So when I'm giving a talk, I kind of gauge, okay, what is it that's coming through right now? And whatever's coming through, it's like, okay, this is what I'm being intuitively guided to share. And so just to give you an example as to one of these interesting little meetings that I had recently, I want to say it was about a month ago. About a month ago, I woke up in the middle of the night, but I was still in a dream. Have you ever had that where you like wake up but you're still dreaming? Do you know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand if you've ever had that.
Yes.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. So I woke up and I was still in a dream. And I found myself in this interesting, like kind of like out of body state where I was kind of like floating above my body, you know? And so I found myself just kind of like looking around my room in the middle of the night in this interesting state. And as I'm looking around my room, I see this man standing in my room. And this man is emanating this beautiful, pure, crystalline white light. He has like this light body. And I'm looking at him, and as I'm kind of acknowledging him, we have this sort of brief telepathic exchange where he tells me that he's a Pleiadian. Is this too far out, by the way? Okay, I'm just gonna go for it. Okay, this is my dream. Okay, I was like wondering, is this gonna be too much? But yeah, so he tells me, he's like, I'm a Pleiadian. And so after this brief little introduction, the next thing I know, I'm being walked through this school. And I'm being taken into these different classrooms. In the first classroom that I get walked into, they're studying music. And they're studying sound. And they're studying composition. And then they walk me into another classroom where they're studying literature and they're studying language and language composition. And then I get walked into this third classroom. And in this third classroom, they're studying mathematics and they're studying physics. And as I walk into this third classroom, this being comes up and she greets me and she holds up this chart of all these different waves, these different wave formations. And as she's showing me this chart, she starts telling me about the oscillation patterns of waves and the measurements of waves and what waves are, the structure of waves. And as she's telling me this information, I feel my whole body just get filled with this ecstasy as this information is coming in. And I'm just like, oh my God, it feels so good to be receiving this. And so this has been one sort of dream, one sort of encounter out of several that I've had over the past 3 months. It's been really, really active. And so recently, one of my recent projects is I've been trying to record and document this information that's been coming in. And I'm going to compile a book around this. And the book, I'm going to call it Mirrors to the Mind of God. It's going to be called Mirrors to the Mind of God. Okay? And what this book is going to be about is it's going to be about these different universal codes. And through understanding these codes, they help us to blend our personal mind with the universal mind. Merge the little I with the big I, right? And so through understanding these codes, they sort of help us to see ourselves and to see our life through the eyes of the soul. So that's sort of what I'm going to be talking about today. And so today I'm going to be talking about one of these codes in particular that's been coming in as part of this book. And so this code that I'm going to be talking about today, what it does is it represents the natural flow of universal energy. So that means that you could take this one code and you could apply it to any field, and it would be relevant and applicable and useful. So you could take this one code and you could apply it to biology, you could apply it to psychology, you could apply it to physics, you could apply it to math, you could apply it to technological advancement, which people are actually working on now. You could apply it to the cultivation of free energy, which people are actually working on now. And you could also apply it to healing trauma, which I'm going to speak about briefly here a little bit today. So you can apply this code all over the board because it represents the flow of universal energy. So today, the way that I'm going to talk about this code is I'm going to talk about how we can use it to understand ourselves and the experiences of our life, what we're going through the eyes of the soul. Okay. Does all this make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure I'm not crazy. Sometimes I question that at times. So I'm going to start off by kind of using this little geometry here as a platform to kind of talk about this. Has anybody seen this geometry before? Does anybody know what this is? If you know it, you can just blurt it out.
I think it's the Venn circle.
What is it?
The Venn circle.
Yeah, you got it. It's called the Vesica Piscis. The Vesica Piscis. I didn't make this up, okay? This is a very ancient symbol. It's I didn't invent the language of the universe. I'm just kind of the voice for it, you know what I mean? But this is a very ancient symbol. It's called the Vesica Piscis. And what it represents is it represents this union of opposites and the creative energy that is brought forth from that point of connection between them. So it's been used to represent the union between God and goddess and the fertility of birth. It's been used to represent the blending of humanity with divinity, this center point being Christ. Okay? So this code, what it is it's the union of opposites. And when you can take two opposing forces and blend them together, it creates this portal through which light enters this world. Okay? And so the way that this geometry works, you have one circle and another circle. And one of these circles represents one frame of consciousness. And the other one represents a separate frame of consciousness. And that point of overlap between them creates this portal through which light, through which information enters this world. So, in the center of this Vesica Piscis, what do we see? What is this? A cross. Where do we see the cross? Christianity. Where else do we see the cross? Any other ideas?
Intersections of the streets.
Intersections of streets. Yeah.
Mathematics, plus sign.
Math. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't make that connection. That's a good one. Mathematics and the plus sign. We also see it in the center of the zodiacal wheel. We also see it in the Lakota Native American traditions with the four directions and the medicine wheel, right? The Celtic cross.
Oh, the Arizona.
What is it?
The Arizona play, I think, has it. With
Oh,
the thumb on it.
the Arizona?
Yeah, the Arizona play symbol. They got it on the flag.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that
With
either.
the circle, and then you have a cross.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Wow.
Yeah, so you see this all over the place. It's a universal symbol, and it pops up sort of archetypally amongst all these different cultures and religions and mythologies and so on and so forth. And so the original meaning of this symbol is that this is actually a symbol for light. It's actually a symbol for light, and I'm going to explain why. So this right here, can everybody see this, by the way? Okay, so this is a light wave, okay? And a light wave is actually an electromagnetic wave. So a light wave is actually two different waves oscillating and weaving in and out of each other. There's one electrical component, which we can see right here, and there's a magnetic component. And so they do this dance where they weave in and out of each other, and they intersect at these 90-degree angles. Okay? So if you were to look at a light wave straight on, what do you think you would see? The cross, right? You could see this is where they intersect at those 90 degrees. So this long wave right here, the length actually represents the electric component. The length represents the electric component of the wave, and the width represents the magnetic component of the wave. So you see, you have these two separate frames of consciousness. That point of overlap between them creates this portal through which light enters this world. It's pretty cool, huh? There's a lot of information in this geometry. It's quite simple, but there's a lot here. So I want to go over just a couple of examples as to how this plays out in our universe. Some of these are obvious, some of these are not so obvious. But the first, most obvious example is between male and female, right? Male and female. Biologically speaking, what's the overlap between male and female? We're all grown-ups.
Sex.
Yeah, there we go. Making love, right? Man and woman come together, they make love, and they create this portal through which spirit is able to descend into matter, right? It's like all those little souls up there in heaven. What do you think they're waiting for down on earth, right? They're waiting for a mommy and daddy to come together. When they see that, they say, hey, there's an opening. I think I'm going in. Right? So you have this union of opposites, right? You have this union of polarities, and that meeting point between those polarities creates this portal through which light, through which information, through which spirit descends into matter. You see that? It's pretty cool. Another example which I thought this was absolutely fascinating when I sort of figured this out, was the light of the sun. The light of the sun. So in the ancient world, right, the first most rudimentary forms of religion and spirituality, what was it?
Sun worship.
Sun worshiping, right? It was sun worshiping. So the ancients believed that the sun was a portal through which higher dimensional energy, higher dimensional information entered the physical plane. That's what they believed. And I'm going to tell you, the ancients were not far off for believing that. They were not far off, okay? So let's look at the sun for just a second. So the sun is about 70% hydrogen. It's about 28% helium, and it's about 2% other mass gases and metals and elements and so on and so forth. But predominantly, it's this giant ball of hydrogen up there in space. Okay? So if we look at hydrogen, right? Hydrogen is the first element in the periodic table, which means that it's the oldest element in the universe, or at least it's theorized to be the oldest element in the universe. And if we look at a hydrogen atom, it's composed of two elements. It's composed of a proton and an electron. One positive and one negative charge, that's it. And this sets it apart from all of the other atoms, all of the other elements in the universe, because all of the other atoms are actually composed of three parts. They're composed of protons, electrons, and neutrons, right? Protons, electrons, and neutrons. So they have a positive, a negative, and a neutral charge. So most of this universe is actually composed of parts of three. Most of physicality is composed in a triune pattern. They're composed in a trinity sequence. And the exception to this rule is found in the more primeval regions of the universe, the more ancient aspects of the universe. And in the older regions of the universe, we see this binary sequence happening. It's more dualistic in the older regions of the cosmos. So hydrogen, being the oldest element in the universe, has this binary sequence. Unless, of course, it's heavy hydrogen and it has a neutron, but if it's just pure hydrogen, it has that proton and that electron, that positive and that negative charge. And it's that primary relationship between that positive and negative charge, that point of union, that point of attraction between them, which creates this portal through which light, information enters this world.
Fusion?
Fusion.
Fusion?
Yeah, fusion is a part of that. So if we look at that through the lens of the Vesica Piscis, we have a proton, an electron, and that point of intersect, which creates that opening for information. And of course the sun, it does have this process of nuclear fusion that happens where hydrogen gets converted into helium, which turns into all these other elements that projects the light out. But it's that primary relationship between that proton and that electron, that positive and negative, which creates this opening for light. So the ancients were not far off, were they? It's pretty cool, huh? It's pretty cool. So I want to go over one more way that this code expresses itself in our universe. And this is a little bit more relevant to what I'm going to be kind of going into. And I want to talk about how this code applies to healing trauma. Okay? To healing trauma. So, we're all sort of traumatized, just a little bit, aren't we? Just a little bit.
Some days more than others.
Some days we're all kind of traumatized a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's That's just part of the game that we play when we come here. That's part of the agreement, you know? It's part of the alchemical process of working through that. And so when we do experience trauma, right, we become fundamentally split. Where there's one side of us that feels unsafe. One side of us that feels a loss of power, a loss of self, right? Feels separate. And then on the other side of that, there's a part of us that does feel safe, that does feel connected, that feels loved, that feels empowered, right? And so we have these two polarizing aspects. And in order to heal trauma, what we do is we weave between those aspects. So we go and we re-experience that disempowerment, that loss of self, that unsafety, and then we go and we meet it with love, with compassion. And then we go and we re-experience that again, that loss of self, and then we meet it with love. And we weave between these two polarities in this infinity sequence. This is how we reintegrate ourselves, right? This is how we reintegrate. And so as we do this oscillation over the course of our lives, what happens is we have these two aspects that slowly get brought closer together until they hit that point of overlap. And when they hit that point of overlap, that's the point when we begin to radiate, we bring forth the light of our soul into this world. You see? So, is it okay if we close that? It's like
I was just thinking that times.
I was like, thinking, like, man, that's so distracting.
Trauma.
Yeah, slightly traumatic, right?
Yeah.
It is. Have you ever like woken up in the morning and someone's like chainsawing?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's kind of traumatic.
But then we just go back to bed.
And- yeah.
The other side.
Somehow incorporate it into your dream state, if you can. So anyways, it's through this weaving between these opposites that blend these two aspects together so that we can create this portal that reveals the light of our soul. You see?
In other words, when we go through a traumatic episode, the good part of us can extract something great from some traumas occasionally and be
Absolutely.
and teach others, teach ourselves, we become stronger. It's like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's through this process where our doubts get converted into knowing, into real knowing. Experience, exactly. Where that confusion gets transmuted through this process into clarity. And where our woundedness gets transfigured into genius, into brilliance, into resilience, into strength. You see? It's the merging of humanity with divinity, where we get Christ, you see. And so, it's really interesting when we look at it in this way. And the whole reason why we come here to be in this experience, the whole purpose is for you to be who you are and to embody and shine forth the light of your soul. That's the whole purpose. And so all of life is orchestrated around facilitating that process for you. You see? So all of the experiences that you are going through, all of the relationships in your life, all of the interesting characters that show up in your dream, whether you like them or not, your struggles, your gifts, your dreams, your aspirations, it is all happening in accordance with divine design. And it all is orchestrated around this fundamental pattern of bringing these opposites together to find these points of connection so that we can open up this portal through which the light of the divine is made manifest in this world. So I think I kind of want to wrap up here by grounding all of this in personal experience, ground it into something a little human, right? So for me, studying this symbol, looking at this, has been profoundly healing. And for me, I used to be somebody that I would go through a difficult period, or go through some kind of challenge, and I would totally blame myself full-heartedly for what I was going through. Does anyone else have that or felt like that sometimes? Yeah, somebody would break up with me and I'd be like, oh my God, it's because there's something so wrong with me that this is happening, right? And I used to just have this really skewed idea when I was younger that I used to think I was like some kind of mistake in the cosmos. And that God had some kind of accident when he made me. And so anytime I would go through a challenging time, I would think that it was God trying to punish me or eradicate me or something like that. It's twisted, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's twisted. It's so twisted. And so when I was younger, one of the biggest things that I really struggled with was depression. And I used to have these crippling bouts of depression when I was younger. And there was two major points in my life where I came up against this brush with suicide. 2 points in my life. One in my late teens, once in my early 20s. And what was going on in my early 20s was I was in this really deep relationship. But it was also really unhealthy and really unbalanced. You guys ever had that before? Yeah, it's one of those, right? It was really deep, it was really beautiful, but it was totally unhealthy, so it kind of keeps you in it, the profundity of it. And so it was like that. And so upon this relationship totally falling apart, my self-concept was so distorted, and I thought that I was totally inadequate. I thought I was a total failure. And I just did not see any positive future for myself at that time. It was I kind of hit this place where I was like, you know what, I've hit the end of the road. And I've hit a dead end, and you know what, I'm so far off my path, I just need to hit the reset button. That's what I thought, Has any of you guys ever been there? If you can, it's safe to say that, I think we've all been there. That's why I can talk about this. So, I remember one evening, I went to the store and I got a box of sleeping pills. And I went and I drove to this empty parking lot over by this open field, and I poured all of the sleeping pills in my hand. I had about 20 or 30 of these pills. And I was just going to take all of them at once. And then just recline back in my seat, and I was just going to go to sleep and not wake up. I was just going to let go. And I remember that moment of just sitting in my car and just looking at this handful of pills, right? And just thinking wow, I'm about to just let go, just like that. And I remember all of my thoughts and all of my feelings just rushing forth. And I remember thinking about my mom and my dad and my family and what they would think and all of this stuff. And I just remember sitting with that moment. And you know what? I'm so thankful I didn't do it. I'm so grateful I didn't do it, because at the time, I couldn't foresee any of the things that I'm doing now. I couldn't foresee myself giving talks. I couldn't foresee myself writing a book. I couldn't foresee myself teaching or working with people. And right now I'm seeing this really beautiful woman, and it's the love is so pure and so sweet. And it's I would have missed all of that, if I would have just let go. But I'll tell you, the gold in that darkness for me was that in that period of darkness, there was so much energy and so much desire that was built up in that darkness that propelled me into the opposite direction. And that darkness actually propelled me to be here with you in this moment. It's I don't know if I would have the drive or the desire or the wisdom to be doing what I'm doing now if I wouldn't have gone through that. And it's also interesting too, because I've worked with people in different ways over the years, and I have this like theme of attracting people that are on the verge of suicide. You know? And I look at that and I go, you know what? Thank God I went through everything I went through so that I would know how to relate. I would know how to respond. And at the time of being in that darkness, I thought I was a total screw up. I thought I was a total failure, and that's why I was going through that. And I was so far off my path. But little did I know that I was actually so on my path, because that was actually a necessary gate of initiation that I needed to go through to become the person that I was always destined to become in this world. You see? So what you see right now, this guy that stands before you, you know, this is the result of merging the depths of my humanity with the heights of my divinity. And in this, we get Christ. And we're all in that process of embodying that light of Christ. You know, it's like people talk about the return of Christ, the return of Jesus. Well, guess what? You are the return of Christ. It's you. It's you. And so I just want to say that whatever challenge you might be facing right now, whatever it is that you might be going through, I want you to know that whatever that is for you, whatever that is one small piece in this much larger mosaic that reflects the masterpiece of the person that you were always destined to become. And so with whatever it is that you're facing, whatever you're going through, you can trust your experience. You can trust life. Because there's a plan out there, and it's all happening in accordance with divine design. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.